Welcome to my channel, Andra Makes, where I'll be sharing things I've made, and today I'm going to be showing you step by step how to sew the Ashton top by Helen's Closet. But before I do that, I thought it would be fun in each video to quickly share a mug from my collection, so here's today's mug. I think that mug is perfect for today's video because the designer of the pattern we're going to be sewing is from Canada. And it's Helen from Helen's Closet, and we're going to be sewing the Ashton top. It is a A-line tank top. It's made for woven fabrics, and this is a staple. You will want to make 100 of these once you've made one. And it is a wonderful pattern for beginners. I am going to take you step by step, starting with how to download the PDF and how to print it, how to trim it, tape it together, everything, start to finish. So if you're a beginner, if you've never sewn a garment before, if you want to get into garment sewing, if you're a quilter or a bag maker, this is perfect for you. You probably have fabric already in your stash for this since it uses woven, and I am really excited about it. And here are the ones I've made so far. This is the cropped version. This is view B. And this is they call it a silky print. I got it from Joann. And I wear this with my high-waisted pants. I wouldn't wear it otherwise because nobody needs to be seeing that. And this is the second one I've made. I made this with a double gauze. And this is the longer version, view A. And this is the view A, the longer version, is the one I'm going to be showing you in this tutorial. And she has options for using bias binding for the armholes and neck and hem. But I'm not going to be showing that because if you've seen any of my videos, you know I'm not a huge fan of bias binding. So Helen gives us the amazing option of doing an all-in-one facing. Let me take this off so you can see it better. It looks like this. And it finishes the neckline and the armholes, so no hemming. And as you can see here, I've used a contrasting fabric. You don't have to use the same fabric for your facings and your main pieces. And there's the hem facing for this one, also in the contrasting fabric. And here's the one I made during this tutorial. This is a vintage fabric that belonged to my husband's grandmother, so I was thrilled to use it. And for the facing, I used a very lightweight denim. I think that looks super cute. And it also has bust darts. There's only 2. So if you are a beginner, you're going to learn how to mark and sew bust darts. Trust me, it isn't scary at all. You can totally do it. You're going to learn how to do the facings and also the hem facing. The facings at the neck and armholes and the facing for the hem. So lots of valuable skills there. And I think you will really enjoy sewing this pattern. There aren't difficult steps. It's just basically straight line sewing. So you can totally do this. If you are a beginner, the fabric I recommend is a non-directional busy print. You don't want all your print going the same direction. You want it non-directional, busy print in a good quality quilting cotton. You will be making, let's just say you're going to make the test garment if this is your first one. You still want to use a good quality quilting cotton because You don't want to be frustrated using a quality of cotton that frays, because you're going to be needing a nice folded edge, and the less that frays, the better. And I'd also like to recommend, if you're a beginner and the good quality quilting cotton that you choose, on the wrong side of the fabric, if it could be really light or white and not really busy and not a lot of print on the wrong side, because we're going to be drawing, marking dart lines, and the easier that is for you to be able to see, the better. So keep that in mind when you're choosing fabric as well. And if you're a beginner, I also recommend using a solid fabric for your facings, because you'll be able to see what you're doing a lot better. If this is your first garment or first few garments, I think that will be helpful to use a solid fabric for your facings. You'll just be able to see your stitches better and see where you are and everything like that a lot better. So I definitely recommend that as well. And also, if you're a beginner, I don't want you to get overwhelmed when you are trying to pick a size. Helen is very thorough in her instructions about how to measure yourself and all those things. I highly recommend measuring yourself. Like I said, Helen is very thorough and shows you where to measure and how to measure. Just be on the lookout, because she has both inches and yards listed, and also centimeters and meters. So make sure you're looking at the correct chart for whichever of those measurements you'll be using. And like I was saying, don't get overwhelmed. She also has a section on, like, if you need to grade the pattern between sizes, or if you may need to move the bust dart or lengthen or shorten or anything like that. Don't worry about that right now for your first garment. Just measure yourself and pick your size according to those measurements, that straight size, and make that size. And then after you've made that your practice garment, then you'll be able to know if you need to make all those adjustments. And her patterns are drafted for someone who's 5'6". I'm 5'11". I've made all three of these and I've never had to adjust the length. So keep that in mind also. I know you will really love the fit of this garment. Helen's drafting is superb. Even though it's a quote-unquote simple garment, the added touches that she has make it a great fit. I love the armholes. There's no gaping. You know, sometimes they will poof out and all that around your armholes, but this does not do this at all. So go to Helen's website, helenscloset.com, purchase the PDF downloadable pattern for the Ashton top. It's a digital pattern. You will get it within seconds of ordering it, and make an account on Helen's Closet's website, and then meet me there and let's sew the Ashton top. I'm logged in to my Helen's Closet account, and I'm on the My Downloads page, and here are the instructions, and you need to download those, and you can either print them off or just save them on your computer and read them from your computer screen, whichever you'd like to do. And I'm going to scroll down and find my size that I want to download. Okay, I want this one, the PDF pattern print at home, so I'm going to click on that. And here it is down here on my computer. Yours might be different, so I'm going to close this out. and you want to download and install Acrobat Reader DC. The icon looks like this. It's free. They do have a paid version, but you don't need that. But make sure you have that downloaded and installed on your computer, and you want to go ahead and open that. And then we're going to, on my computer, yours might be different, but we're going to go to My Computer, Browse, we're going to click Downloads, and there it is. So we're going to open it. Make sure you're in Adobe when you open it. So double click, and there it is. Open in Adobe. So Helen has the awesome option of a layers panel, which is right here, which means you choose which size you're going to print, and you click on the layers panel, which I'll show you in just a minute, and it only prints that size. You know how Big Four commercial patterns, they have like 10 different sizes with 10 different lines going in every direction. When you have a layers panel, you don't have to deal with that. So that's another reason why I love indie patterns. So I'm going to select the layers panel, and I want to print size 12. So I'm going to unclick all the other sizes. Okay, so I have size 12 selected. So now I'm going to go up here and select Print. And then I'm going to select Grayscale Black and White and Save Ink Toner. This is very important. You see all these page size things? Shrink oversized pages is selected. You do not want that. Always select actual size, which is right here. Very important. So you want it to print actual size. We want to print page 2 only at first to make sure that everything's printing at the correct size. So click on Pages and type in page 2. Not sure if they're printed or not, so let me try that again. Page 2, and then print in grayscale, save ink toner, actual size. Make sure that is clicked. Very important. So we're going to print page 2 and check and make sure we're printing everything correctly. So click Print. Okay, here is our page 2 that we just printed that has the test square on it, and it says the test square should measure 2 inches by 2 inches or 5 centimeters by 5 centimeters. So we're going to measure that and make sure we print it correctly. Mine's measuring 2 that way and measuring 2 inches that way. So the test page did print correctly. So continue printing the rest of the pages you need for your size, and meet me back here and I'll get you started on how to trim them and tape them together. Okay, we're back with all our printed pages for the size we want to make. And if you'll notice, there are triangles on each page. with a number and letter. There's 1A. So this is page 2. So find page 3. And it also has a 1A triangle. So we're going to match those together, but before we do that, we need to trim along that line on page 3 and trim along this line on page 2 so we can match those up. So you can use scissors if you want to, but I have a rotary cutter that's fancily labeled that says paper only, so that's what I'm going to use. And you can also use a ruler if you want to line up and trim that, but I'm just going to do it freehand because that's how I roll. So on page 2, on the right hand side, we're going to trim that line. Just barely to the right of that line. Try not to cut into the line, but if you do, no big deal. Okay, there's page 2 trimmed. And now we're going to get page 3 and trim this line of the 1A triangle. What that looks like. So now we're going to match page 2 with page 3 at the 1A triangle. So line this up. Matching all the lines and the triangles. You have lines on 2 double lines on the bottom. So match those up where everything's straight. And this is straight as well. Grab some tape. Tape that together. Where you just butted those up against each other. Okay, that's what that looks like. So now page 3. There's a 1B triangle, so find page 4, and it has a 1B triangle. So we're going to trim this on page 4. That is trimmed, and we're going to match it up with page 3, 1B, 1B, match those up, and this line with the arrow, match it up so everything's nice and straight. You just want them butted up against each other and not overlapped. And tape those together. And then just continue trimming and taping, and when you have them all taped together, meet me back here and I'll show you the next step. Yay, you did it! That wasn't so bad, was it? Helen makes it really easy for us to know where all the pieces butt up against each other. I find it kind of relaxing actually to do this, especially if there's only a few pattern pieces. Just turn on a podcast or some music and get it done. Now the next step, you should have 10 pattern pieces. She has them numbered for us, and the next step is to cut along the line for your pattern pieces of the size that you chose. Now be careful on the piece number 1, the front bodice piece, you see this triangle right here? That is a dart. So do not cut those lines. Just cut along the lines of all the pattern pieces, getting as close to the line as you can without cutting into it. But like I said, if you do cut into it a little, it's no big deal. And pattern pieces 9 and 10 are if you're going to do a bias binding neckline. Now I'm not going to do that or show that in this tutorial, so if you're not going to use that either, you don't need to cut those pattern pieces out, 9 and 10. But if you are going to do bias binding on your own, go ahead and cut those out and meet me back here and I'll show you the next step. I forgot to mention, when you're cutting out your pattern pieces, you won't need all 4 front and back hem facings, only the pieces you need for which view you're going to make. So if you're making view A, you need pieces 5 and 6, and if you're making view B, you need pieces 7 and 8, not all 4. Okay, now that we have our pattern pieces cut out, we're going to put them on our fabric and use them as our guide to cut our fabric. And here's what the dart should look like when you cut out the front bodice piece. And I also want you to look for these lines on the front bodice piece. There's 2. There's one at the armhole and one down here at the bottom. Those are called notches, and I'm going to show you in a minute what to do with those. But this is how we place. Oh, and notice here it says cut on fold, and I'm going to show you what that means and how to do that. All fabric has a selvage, and it is this more tightly woven strip. There will be one along the top and along the bottom of your fabric, and that's a selvage. And you want to have one selvage at the bottom. Here's mine, the fabric I'm using, and then the other one's hanging off the edge of my table. And what you want to do is fold your fabric up just enough that your pattern piece will fit on it. That way you don't want the selvage to touch the other selvage, because you would be wasting a lot of fabric that way. So fold it up and smooth it just enough that your pattern piece will fit on it, and then find a line on your cutting mat and make sure it's lined up nice and straight. Now my fabric isn't very wide since it's a vintage fabric, but yours may be wider than mine, so if it is, bring your other selvage down and fold it. It would be more in half than this, and see if your pattern piece will fit on the other fold on the other side, and that way you can cut your front bodice here and your back bodice there. But mine isn't wide enough, so I'm not going to be able to do that. But here's the fold of your fabric. So take your pattern piece, and where it says cut on fold, place your pattern piece on the fold, straight across. Nice and straight. Make sure your fabric's all smooth. And then you need to either use pattern weights, which is what I'm going to use, or you can also use sewing pins for this. And you want, basically you're anchoring this down to your fabric so it doesn't shift around when you're cutting. So I'm going to use pattern weights, and here are some of mine. My friend Tamara actually made these for me, so Tamara, if you're watching, thank you so much. I love these and use them often. And these are washers that you can get at a home improvement store, and she wrapped them in these beautiful ribbons in my favorite color, pink, which I thought was so sweet. You can also use canned food from your pantry to hold your pattern piece down, so just find whatever works. And I'm going to go ahead and place these on my pattern piece. and I'm going to use my rotary cutter. You can use scissors if you need to. If you do use scissors, I recommend using pins to pin through your pattern piece and your fabric instead of weights, but do whatever works for you. And we're going to cut around the pattern piece. Don't cut the fold. And after we're finished with that, leave your pattern weights or pins or whatever on your pattern piece and your fabric, and I'll show you what to do with the notches. So I'm going to cut mine out and be back to show you the next step, and you cut yours out too. Okay, I have my pattern piece cut out, but I still have my weights and or pins on it. And what you want to do with the lines that are notches is take a small pair of snips and snip into that line, paper and all, and make sure you're going through both layers of your fabric, and just cut a small snip. Don't go too far down because you don't want to go into your seam allowance. So snip it just enough that it will split the fabric a little bit right on that line. And check it and make sure it went through both layers. And those are going to be important when we start constructing the garment. So make sure you have snips right there that went through both layers of the fabric, and also snip your notch at the bottom the same way. And then you're going to do the exact same process for your back bodice piece. Just make sure you do not fold. Make sure you don't cut the fold. Make sure you fold your fabric the same way and cut around it and snip through the notches, and meet me back here for the next steps. And also keep your pattern piece with your cutout fabric, keep those together. It'll make it easier when we construct the garment, and you'll know that you have the right fabric with the right piece. Since I'm using a different fabric for all my facings, here is mine, and we're going to do the exact same thing we did for the front bodice and back bodice. Here's my selvage, and I have it folded up just enough to cut my pattern piece out. And again, don't cut into your selvage, have it down from your selvage. Here's my fold, nice and neat and straight, and all the facing pieces, all four, you cut on the fold. So make sure you have the pieces that say cut on fold at the fold. And all of them have notches, so watch for those, and just do the same process you did for the front bodice piece and the back bodice piece. Cut around the pattern piece. Leave your weights or pins on, cut into your notches, and then leave the pattern piece with the corresponding fabric piece. So do that, and I will meet you back here for the next step. Okay, we should have all these pieces cut out. Front bodice, back bodice, front facing, back facing, and front and back hem facings. Okay, now we're going to learn how to mark a dart. Trust me, it is not scary at all, and this is the method I use. There are several different ways to do this, but this is personally how I do it. So if you are an experienced garment sewer and have a way that you like to do it, please feel free to use your method. But I have switched to this white fabric so you could see it better. I've made a faux front bodice side, so this is the wrong side of your front bodice piece. So turn it so it is wrong side facing up, and get your pattern piece for the front bodice piece. Here's the dart on the fabric, and line up your pattern piece. That's also right side up. So it is lined up with your dart, and check your notch on your underarm seam and make sure everything's lined up nicely. And you're going to need a sewing pen and a writing pen. They're pronounced the same here in the South. This is my favorite one because it's fine, and I have tried like a bazillion different markers, and this one is my favorite. If I can find it on Amazon, I will post a link for it in the description box. But the only downside to this color is it doesn't show up well on certain color fabrics. That's why I'm not using my actual front bodice piece. So keep that in mind. And I don't know if these come in different colors. I will check that out. And what you're going to do is make sure everything, like I said, is lined up nicely. And you're going to take your sewing pin and stick it in the center of the circle at the end of the dart. Let me scoot this up a little closer so you can see. Well, first, what we're going to do, is just like we snipped into the notches, we're going to snip into the end of these darts. Well, it's actually the beginning of the dart, but you know what I mean. So just take some snips and snip in just a little bit. Make sure it has a split. That one didn't make it. Let me try again. There we go. Okay, so do that, and then make sure everything's still lined up, and then get your sewing pin and stick it in the center of that circle at the end of your dart, and get your sewing pin. Make sure you're using something that isn't permanent, that is for sewing, that disappears in one way or another. Hold on to your sewing pin. Make sure it's going straight up and down, and then peel your pattern piece back without moving your sewing pin. And then mark where the tip of that pin is going into the fabric. Just make a dot. There's what it looks like. Can you see it? There. Okay, now all we're going to do is get a straight edge. I'm going to use my quilting ruler and turn your fabric so it's comfortable for you, and we're going to line up the center of the mark you just made with the center of your little notch. So just place your straight edge down, find the center of the dot you made, and then the center of your notch. Fix it so you can see that. See where I'm folding that back? That's the center. And then the center of your mark. Take your time. And then you're just going to connect those. The center of the dot you made with the center of the notch you made. Okay, now we're going to do that on the other side of the dart. Find the center of the dot you made with the marking pen. At the center of your notch, peel it back and make sure it's in the center. And then connect those two. Let me make this one a little darker so you can see it better. The first one I made. There you go. You just marked your dart. Just remember to do it on the wrong side of your front bodice piece. Now you're going to do the same thing to the other side of your front bodice piece, but you will need to flip your pattern piece upside down to get it to line up properly. So go ahead and mark both darts, and then we will get to sewing. Let's start sewing. Are you excited? I am. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is stay stitch all the pieces except the hem bands. And what stay stitching does, it's kind of like a stabilizer, and it keeps your fabric from stretching, and it's mainly used in curved areas. So how I'm going to do this tutorial is I'm going to go ahead and sew the step and then show it to you and show you how to do it. I'm not actually going to film me sewing at the machine. This video would be 10 hours long if I did that, and I don't really think it's necessary, but I do think it will flow better if I have already sewn the step and then walk you through how to do it, and then you go sew the step. So let me know what you think about that after we've gone through the tutorial. But I have used a bright orange thread so it will show up better so you guys can see it better, but you want to use a coordinating thread that coordinates with your fabric. So this is the front facing. What I'm holding on to right here are your shoulder seams. This is the neckline, and on the outside of the shoulder seams are the armholes. That might help you wrap your head around what everything looks like. And when we stay stitch the curves, we don't go from one end completely to the other in one fell swoop. What you're going to do is start at the shoulder seam, and you're going to sew to the middle of the neckline, and then you're going to flip your facing over, start at the other end, and sew back to the center. So you're starting on the tops, going to the middle, starting on this top and going to the middle, and you will overlap your seams in the middle. I missed that one a little bit, oops. But that's how you do the neckline. And then the same thing for the armholes. Start at the shoulder seam. Let me put this down like this. I think this is better, but let me know. These are the armholes. Start at the shoulder seam, sew halfway, take it out of the machine, flip it over, start down here. Oop, there we go. And then sew back to the middle and overlap your threads a little bit. And you want to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and this will not be shown in your finished garment because it's inside the seam allowance we'll be using. And then same thing for the opposite armhole. Start at the shoulder, sew halfway, stop, flip it over, start at this end and come back and meet in the middle with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So that's your front facing. Here's your back facing. Same thing, what I'm holding are your shoulder seams. This is the back neckline right here, and on the outside of your shoulder seam are the armholes. So same thing for the neckline, stay stitching. Start at one shoulder, sew to the middle, take it out, flip it over, start over here, sew to the middle, and overlap your stitches. Same thing for the armhole. To help you remember, the armhole is on the outside of your shoulder seam. So start at the shoulder, go down halfway, flip it over, start down here, come back, and meet in the middle. Same thing for the other side. So there are your two facing pieces, stay stitched, and we're going to do the same thing for the neckline and the armholes of both bodice pieces, front and back. These are a little easier to tell the shoulder seam, neckline, and armholes. So, same thing, 1/4 inch seam allowance. Start at the shoulder, sew halfway, take it out, flip it over, start on the opposite side, meet in the middle. Same thing for your armholes. Start at the shoulder, sew halfway, take it out, flip it over, start at the bottom, and meet in the middle. The main idea is to not sew a continuous line. You want to sew halfway from the top and then halfway from the bottom and meet in the middle. So do that for your front bodice, and your back facing and your front facing pieces. And then meet me back here. Dart sewing time! Yay! You guys will not believe how unintimidating this is. You will need several sewing pins, so get those ready. And what you're going to do is find your dot that you made and pinch it right in the center of the dot. By the way, this is the wrong side of your fabric, facing up. Wrong side of your fabric up. We always mark and sew on the wrong side of the fabric. So find your dot, wrong side of your fabric, and get it where the dot is in the center of what you have pinched. You don't want it too far this way, like that, or too far the other way, but make sure it's in the center as best you can get it. And then take a pin, stick it right through there to hold it. Okay, now we're going to find the notches we made at the beginning of our darts. The split in the fabric, there's one, and there's one. And we're going to fold it so your fabric is right sides together. All you can see is the wrong side of your fabric here. So fold it right sides together and match up those notches, keeping the raw edges even. There we go. See how those are matched up? And put a pin right through there to hold it. Okay, we're going to do that pin all the way down through our dart. And the way you know you have it even or not is you push it through the mark. This is hard, you guys. I have the camera right underneath my chin. Push it through that mark. And then look on the other side and see if it's coming through the other mark. And mine isn't, so I need to adjust a little bit. Try again. Nope. Just have to keep adjusting until you get it. It's no biggie. Just take your time. There we go. The pin's going through the mark on the front and coming out the mark on the back. So when you have it perfect, secure your pin and just keep going all the way down the line like that. Put it through that mark. Check the back. Maybe move it up a little bit. Stick it through. Check the back. Nope, a little too much. This is real life sewing, guys. There we go. It's going through the front, coming out the back on the line. And pin it. Let's do one more. Through the line. Woo, got it right first time there, through that line. And secure it. Okay, I think we're good on that. So now I'm going to go sew the dart and I will come back and show you what it looks like. Don't sew yours yet though, because there's a trick, so hold on, I'll be right back. Okay, I've sewn my dart, and how you do that is you start at the wide end up here, and you just take a couple stitches and then back stitch. You don't want your back stitch to be way down here and be outside your or within your seam allowance, so you don't want it to show in your garment. So back stitch here, and what I did was I followed the line that I drew, the blue line, with my stitching. And as you can see, it gets narrower and narrower as it gets down to the dot. And by the time you get down to the dot, you're basically sewing off the fabric. And the key thing you need to do here is do not cut your threads when you're finished at the end of your dart. Leave long thread tails. So just stop sewing and do your needle up, and then just pull your project out from your sewing machine, and that will leave long thread tails, and then you cut them. And we do that because we want to tie these in a knot. If you were to back stitch here instead of tying a knot, there would be a little bulk there that would probably show on your garment, and we don't want that. So just leave long thread tails and then tie a couple knots. I usually do 3. 1, 2, 3, and then clip those off. Don't get too close to your knot though, because you don't want it coming out, of course. And there we go, a dart. So repeat that on the other side, and then we're going to press, this is still the wrong side of the fabric, press the dart down toward the bottom where your hem will be. So do those steps and then meet me back here for the next ones. If that was your first dart experience, I hope you realize that it's not intimidating at all, and I hope you are very proud of yourself. Here is my front bodice. I'm back to my actual garment fabric now. Here's my dart on the back. See how it's pressed down? And then here it is on the front. Nicely pressed. And I would like to encourage you to not skip the pressing step during any sewing project. I know it's hard. When I first started sewing, I didn't want to stop and press because I was so excited about wanting to finish the project, but it does make a huge difference in your project, and it makes it look so much nicer. So if you will press after each step, I think you'll be pleased with the results. Okay, the next steps I have done. This is my back bodice piece, and here is the shoulder of the back bodice piece. And I have finished it by serging it. I did lower my blade because I didn't want to cut any off. If you don't have a serger, no worries, just do a zigzag stitch across before you attach them. You're going to have a front bodice piece and a back bodice piece separate. So finish the shoulder edges of your front bodice piece and your back bodice piece either by serging with the blade down or a zigzag stitch, and then after you do that, you're going to put your front bodice and back bodice right sides together, right side to right side, match up your shoulder seams, and then sew them together using a 5/8 inch seam allowance. That's hard to say. So do that on both shoulders, and then press your seams open, and it'll look like that. So go do those steps and then meet me back here for the next ones. The next steps you're going to do are very similar to what you just did with your front and back bodice pieces, except you're going to do it with your front and back facing pieces. You want to finish the bottom edge wherever you don't have stay stitching. This long curve on both pieces, that's what you want to finish. And when I say finish, that just means secure it basically so it doesn't fray. That's what serging and a zigzag stitch does. Again, I used my serger but kept the blade lowered because I didn't want to cut any off. And if you are zigzagging, you don't want it to be super tight because that's just frustrating. Your fabric will bunch up, and also this is a lot longer seam with a curve. So practice on some scrap fabric you have and the same facing fabric that you're using to get the zigzag the exact width and length you want. So finish the bottom edges of your front and back facings, and then just like you did with your bodice pieces, put them right sides together at the shoulder seams and sew the shoulder seams, that's hard to say, at a 5/8 inch seam allowance, and then press your seams open. And I forgot to say in the previous step, you want to back stitch at the beginning and end of every seam. So if you didn't do that on your front and back bodice pieces, I apologize for not mentioning that, but you can go back and do it right now, it's no big deal. But always back stitch at the beginning and end of a seam. So go do that and meet me back here, we're getting closer. I do want to show you this next part before I sew it because it could get a little tricky if you've never sewn a garment before. So I have my front and back bodice pieces right side up. Over here is my front piece, and I know that because it has darts in it. Over here is my back bodice piece. So you're going to take your facing pieces that you just sewed and find the front and back, and the way you do that easily is just fold it at the shoulder seams that you just made, and the lower neckline is the front. So we're going to match the front of the facing pieces, front facing, sorry, with the front of your bodice piece, right sides together. So here's the right side of my front bodice, and here's the right side of my facing. So I'm going to turn it like this and put it right side down. Here is my back facing, here is my back bodice. So just take the back facing and flip it over. And now you have the right side of your front bodice facing, touching the right side of your front bodice, and the right side of your back facing, touching the right side of your back bodice. Here's the right side of my facing and the right side of my bodice. And what we're going to do is sew these together, but just on the inside circle, which is the hole you put your head through, of course, not on the outside up here. Just this inside circle is what we're going to sew. So find your seam and match it up, your shoulder seam for your facing, and match it up with your shoulder seam for your bodices. And use a pin or a wonder clip, whichever you prefer, and pin it together. And then same thing, let's do our shoulder seams first, but just the inside hole, not out here. Match up those shoulder seams. Pin or wonder clip. And we're going to pin or wonder clip all the way around just the inside circle with the facings matching the bodice pieces. And then we're going to sew that inside circle. This is important, not with a 5/8 inch seam allowance, but a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So match up all your raw edges on the inside circle, sew around in using a 3/8 inch seam allowance, and then meet me back here. Here we are with our facings sewn to our bodices, and what we want to do next is trim the seam allowance in the curves, but I'm going to do it actually all the way around, and I'm going to use pinking shears. And if you don't have pinking shears, no worries. Helen has in her instructions, her amazing instructions, directions for cutting snips into different types of curves. And I personally have never done that method before, so I don't really feel comfortable showing you how to do it because I really haven't done it before, like I said. So I'm just going to use pinking shears and trim. Let me start it a little bit. I want to get close to my stitching line, but not cut through the stitches, of course. So I'll get you started if you're using pinking shears, and just make sure you're not cutting into any of your garment. You want to stay outside your stitching lines, and just take your time and stop every few seconds and readjust, and make sure you're not cutting into your actual garment. There's what it looks like if you use pinking shears. And I'm going to continue to do this on mine, and you do your preferred method, and let's meet back here in a minute. Once you've trimmed your seam allowance, pull your facing out away from your bodice piece. Here's my facing and here's my bodices. And this is your seam allowance, the part that you had left over. And when you fold your facing up, you turn it this way, you want your seam allowance going toward the facing like that, not down toward your bodice. So fold it up, the seam allowance, this little part right here, fold it up so it is going toward your facing. And you're going to do that all the way around what you just sewed and trimmed, and take your iron and press it. It'll be a little tricky because it's in a circle, but it's okay. Just take your time and feel with your fingers and make sure the seam allowance is going toward the facing. This is what you'll do. Just kind of reach in and grab that seam allowance and push it up toward the facing, and then press. And just do that all the way around. And then I will show you what to do next. Once you have your seam allowance pressed toward the facing, you're going to take it to the sewing machine and do what's called understitching. And when you put it under your machine, you want your right side of your facing up and the right side of your bodice facing up, both sides facing up. You want to keep it separated like this, pulled apart. Well, not pulled apart, but you want it separated. Make sure your bodice isn't stuck underneath the facing. And you're going to sew. Starting to really dig this orange thread. I think it looks really funky and I like it. Okay, where was I? I recommend starting on a shoulder seam, and you're only going to be sewing on the facing. Try not to let your stitches run over onto your bodice piece. And this is a slow process. Take your time. You're going to be going around curves, and you can do it though. It's not a big deal. Just take your time. And what you want to do is make sure that your seam allowance stays toward the facing, and you can feel it with your fingers as you're going. So just reach underneath and sew a few stitches, stop, readjust, make sure the seam allowance is pointing toward the facing, sew a few more stitches, stop, readjust. You can feel it with your fingers which direction the seam allowance is facing. So you're going to do that all the way around, again trying to stay on your facing fabric and get as close as you can. It's usually like 1/8 of an inch. I like to put the left side of my presser foot against the facing fabric and use that. I think that makes sense, but you'll know what I'm talking about when you get over there. But use whatever foot you're comfortable with and just stitch close to the facing with the seam allowance going toward the facing, and try not to stitch on your bodice piece. So do that and take your time and meet me back here for the next steps. What did you guys think about understitching? Not too bad. It does take a while, especially in a curve, but if you took your time, you should be fine. So now you want to flip your facing to the inside of your bodice pieces. So here's the wrong side of the bodice piece and the right side of the facing. So do that and then give it a good press and pause the video and come back, and I'm going to show you the next step. This is the magic part. If you've never done this before, your mind's going to be blown. Okay, spread out your project, your garment. This is a bodice piece that's wrong side up, facing right side up, and then here's my other bodice piece, wrong side up. So spread it all out, and this is called the Burrito Method, and you're going to see why. Start on one end and start rolling it up. Just keep rolling, and then when you get to about right there, take your facing piece that's right side up, flip it right side down. Okay, do you see this that's left of your bodice pieces that are wrong side up? These facing pieces are going to flip around and be right sides together with this part of your bodice. Okay, you ready? So hold on to your burrito and flip it and look for your facing piece. There it is, right side of the facing, right side of your bodice. And we're not going to pin it or sew it along the straight edge. It's going to be, let me turn it. Let me flip this one over. There we go. Along the curve. So either get clips or pins. And if you'll notice, the rest of your garment is kind of tucked in there, so push it out of the way. You don't want to sew it. Make sure it's tucked down in there. You just want your bodice armhole and your facing armhole. That's all that you're going to be sewing. So clip those together all the way around, keeping your burrito stuffing tucked inside. See, it's inside. Push it down out of the way, and then here are your seams. Match those up. Remember, we're just going to be sewing the curve, not the straight edge, just the curve. Shake it a little bit. Oh, you also have notches here that we made when we cut out the pattern. So match those up. You should have, well, I'm holding 2 notches. One side will have 2 notches and one side will have 1. So match those up. That lets us know that we are doing this correctly. Forgot all about the notches. Just make sure you keep the part of your garment that's tucked inside this burrito, keep it out of your way. You don't want to sew through that. Kind of shake it, stuff it down in there, and here's my single notches. Match those up. Okay, so this is what it should look like. Have the curve pinned. Remember, we're not going to sew this straight edge yet. And then a lot of your garment is tucked inside this burrito. And then that's hanging out, and that's hanging out. So sew this curve, very important, at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Back stitching at the beginning and end. Do that and meet me back here for the next step. Okay, now that you've sewn your seam, shake it really well and feel all along and make sure you did not catch anything that's rolled up in your burrito, that you just sewed 2 layers together. And once you're sure of that, we're going to do like we did in a previous step. I'm going to use my pinking shears, and if you use those, use those. If you use Helen's notching method, use that, whatever you prefer. And we're going to trim this seam allowance, and since it's a curve, we want to use either the notches or the pinking shears because that makes curves lie more flat. So make sure you're only cutting the seam allowance and not into your stitches, just close to your stitches but not through your stitches. And stop every so often and make sure you're only cutting the seam allowance and not any of your project. Okay, now here's where the magic happens. You're going to reach inside your burrito and start pulling what's inside out. Be gentle. Just keep pulling until everything's through. There we go. There are your armhole seams, beautifully sewn with the facing. And now we're going to do the same thing to the other side. So give me just a second and I'll meet you back here. Okay, so this is the armhole seam we just sewed. So this is the finished one. So put it on the bottom, and then here's the one we haven't sewn yet. So you have your wrong side of your bodice pieces up and the right side of your facing up. The unsewn is up here. So start on the sewn side and roll up your burrito. Okay, and take your unsewn facing piece that is now right side up and flip it so it's right side down. And here's the part we're going to attach it to. So hold on to everything inside and flip it. And now your facing piece is right side up. So you can put right sides together of your bodice piece with your burrito fillings stuffed inside. And find your other. And remember, we're not sewing the straight edges yet, just the curve. And we should have some notches again like we did before. Kind of shake everything and stuff it down in there. And you're only sewing the 2 layers, remember. Your facing piece and your bodice piece, right sides together, and find your notches. There are mine, match those up. Match up your seams. Match those up nicely. Making sure to keep everything else tucked down in there. You do not want to sew through that. Only the 2 layers, your facing and your bodice piece. There should be notches over here. There they are. Match those up. And then once you have it all pinned or clipped, and with your fingers all along as you're sewing and pushing the rest of it out of the way, you don't want to sew through it, with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, sew your curve, back stitching at the beginning and end, and either use the notching method or pinking shears like we did on the other side, and trim your seam allowance and then pull it through just like we did the other one. And then I will meet you back here. Now we're ready to sew the side seams. So lay your garment, this is wrong side up, and flip out your facing piece. You don't want it folded down like that so the right side is showing. Flip it up so the wrong side of your facing and the wrong side of your bodice piece is showing. And on all 4 sides, 2 sides of your front bodice and 2 sides of your back bodice, and on your back bodice, make sure that the facing is flipped so it's wrong side up, and you're going to finish all 4 of those edges either with your serger, with your blade dropped, or a zigzag stitch. It's just important that your facing stays wrong side up. So keep all this wrong side up and finish all 4 edges. And then once you do that, we're going to sew the side seams. So pick your garment up so the right sides of your bodices are facing each other, and still keeping, now we have the still keeping your facing spread out like this. You don't want it folded down. And this one also, and match right sides together. These are your side seams. And pin or clip all the way down and try to match up your facing seams as best you can. And you're going to pin or clip it all the way down, and here's the bottom. So finish pinning and clipping all the way down, and once you have finished the edges separately, of course, then put them right sides together and sew both side seams. And now we're back to the 5/8 inch seam allowance. So do that and meet me back here. Once you have your side seam sewn, and pressed open. It should look like this. And now you want to turn your garment right side out. Actually first, I'm sorry. Well, yeah, let's do that. Turn your garment right side out. And that will automatically put your facing down. Okay, don't you guys love a facing? I'm telling you, once you do a facing, you never want to hem again. And the only thing we have left is doing the hem facing. So super excited about that. But Helen suggests once you have folded your facing down, of course you want to give it a good press and use steam if you have it. And she suggests lining up your seam allowances of your facing and your bodice piece and stitching right in the seam line that we made to help hold down the facing. It will attach the facing to the bodice. Where am I? Oh, there I am. It will attach the facing to the bottom if you sew in that seam line. I usually don't do that. I think if you give it a good press with steam, I don't have any problems. And what that prevents is the facing popping out like that. So I'm not going to do that, but if you want to, if you find that your facing pokes out and bothers you and things like that after wearing it, feel free just to tack it down in the seam line. You just want to match your thread as closely as you can to your outer fabric. So all we have left is the hem facing. So join me back here in a second. We are in the home stretch, guys, almost there. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is get our front hem facing and our back hem facings. And we're going to put them right sides together. And your front hem facing will be shorter than your back hem facing. You didn't do anything wrong, so it should be shorter. That's okay. But when you put them right sides together, make sure that the notches for both pieces are at the bottom. You don't want to have one set of notches on the bottom and one set on the top. So make sure both set of notches are on the bottom and the notches will not match. So don't worry about that either. And you're going to line up the straight side edges and sew them together using a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Do the same to the other side. You'll have to pull it over a little bit since it is shorter. So both of those at 5/8 inch, and then press your seam allowances open. And then once you do that, you'll have a tube, of course, and on the unnotched edge, the edge that does not have any notches, you're going to fold that edge up 3/8 of an inch and press it all the way around. And I have this sewing gauge. It's my absolute favorite. And I did check on Amazon, and they do have an affiliate link for this, and I will post that in my description box if you're interested. But I love this one because it has 1/8 increments. So what you do is just slide it down 3 lines, 1/8, 2/8, 3/8. It slides up and down. And then you find the 3/8, and then you can line that up with your fold, and you know that you have 3/8. So fold it up 3/8, press it, just keep going around, and just every so often just take your sewing gauge and check it. So after you do that, it should look like this. Take your time and then meet me back here. We're almost finished. Now, have your top right side out and lay it down in front of you and grab your hem facings and match up right sides together. Slide your hem facing down over your bodice pieces at the hem, and you want to make sure that you're matching the back of your bodice with the back of your hem facings. And the way you can tell the back from the front is the back bodice piece and hem facing piece will have double notches. There'll be 2 notches here and then 2 notches here. And the front pieces will have a single notch. There'll be a single notch here and a single notch here. So that's how you know you're matching the front with the front and the back with the back. And start by matching your side seams. You want them to be right sides together. Match up your side seams and then match up your notches. Either use pin or wonder clips to secure those. Do that for the front piece and the back piece, and then just continue pinning or wonder clipping all the way around, right sides together, and then sew your raw edges using 3/8 inch seam allowance. And make sure that your raw edges of your hem facing are at the top and the part that you just folded under is at the bottom. So do that and then meet me back here. Once you have your hem facing sewn to your bodice piece, we're going to repeat the steps that we've already done several times. So you've got this. You want to trim your seam allowance. You don't necessarily need to use pinking shears this time because there's not a deep curve. So I just used my regular scissors to trim it down to about 1/4 inch. You don't need to measure it or anything. You can just eyeball it, but you do want to leave a little seam allowance, because after you trim your seam allowance, you are going to press the facing down away from your bodice piece like this. Press it down so all the right sides are showing, and then press your seam allowance once again toward the facing. So there's the seam allowance that I just trimmed. Press it toward your facing, and then I keep wanting to say edge stitch. What's it called? I've forgotten. I'm sorry, I forgot, but I've already said it a few times in the video. But with your seam allowance pressed toward the facing, put this in your machine with your facing to the right of you and your bodice to the left, and stitch close to your facing about 1/8 of an inch away all the way around, and just try not to stitch onto your bodice piece. And take your time like we've been doing, and take a few stitches and stop and adjust, and you can feel with your fingers which way the seam allowance is going, and it needs to be going toward the facing. So do that, come back, and we only have one more step. With your garment wrong side up, press the hem facing up. I guess I was going to say down, but press it toward the top of your garment, and this is the edge that you had folded under 3/8 inch, and give it a good press. Use lots of steam if you use steam, and ideally you want a little bit of your bodice fabric, the right side, showing, because this is the hem of the right side, and you can't see any of the facing piece, any of the blue. And ideally that's what you want, and to help achieve that, if you have a little bit of this fabric showing, that will help. So give it a really good press, nice and flat, Like I said, use lots of steam if you use steam. I do. And then, if you feel comfortable pinning it all the way around, definitely pin at the side seams. Where are mine? I can't find them. Anyway, and then if you feel comfortable pinning it all the way around, do that. I did it because lots of steam and pressing helps. And what you're going to do is you're going to be sewing from the wrong side. So you probably want to change your bobbin thread to match the right side of your top, because your bobbin thread is what's going to show when you're wearing the shirt. So keep that in mind. And I lengthen my stitch to about a 3 because I like that look. So you're going to be sewing, like I said, from the wrong side, and sew about 1/8 of an inch along that folded edge of your hem facing. And when you're finished, it should look like this from the inside. And also, I wanted to let you know, if you get some puckers in your hem facing when you're sewing it, don't worry about it. I did. There's one. So there's a pucker on the hem facing, but you don't see it on the right side of your garment. So if you're going to get a pucker, you want your hem facing to pucker and not the right side of your fabric. So if you do get a few puckers in your hem facing, don't worry about it because it won't show on the right side. So do that, give everything a good press. And turn it right side out. And there's your Ashton top. I'll be back in just a second to chat with you guys. Thanks so much for joining me in this tutorial sew along for the Ashton top. I hope you will give it a try. If you make one, I would love to see it. Please tag me on Instagram so I can see it and share it. My Instagram handle is @Andra Makes, and it's also on the end of my video, so you can see it there. And if you did learn anything, if you joined in and would like to give me a tip, I do have a tip jar now on my video, and it is through Ko-fi, Ko-fi. It's basically like buying me a virtual cup of coffee. So if you would like to do that, that's fine. No pressure, no worries. If you can't or whatever, that's fine. The main way you can support me on my channel is to click like on my videos and comment, and also share it with your friends. All those things help the powers that be at YouTube promote my videos on YouTube and help me get the word out. So if you could do those things, that would be fantastic, and I would really appreciate it. This video does contain 2 affiliate links through Amazon. I shared with you my favorite sewing gauge and my favorite marking pen, and I have put links to both of those in the description box below. And all that does is, if you click on that specific link, it will take you to Amazon, and it lets Amazon know that I referred you to them for these products. And it doesn't give me access to your Amazon Prime account. It doesn't give you access to my Amazon Prime account. It's just clicking that link lets Amazon know that I referred you, and I do earn a small commission from Amazon if you purchase the items that I recommend. So if that's something you'd like to do, I would appreciate that as well. If you have any questions about anything in the tutorial, please let me know in the comments. I'll be glad to help any way I can. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch my video and hopefully sew along with me. If you'd like to see future videos of things I make and tutorials, please subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it. See you next time. Bye!